Hey guys, I'm on the Rua de Gloria here in the Baixa neighborhood of Lisbon, and I am just seconds away from the best cheesesteak in all of Portugal. Delphi Cheesesteak is owned and operated by native Philadelphian Mark and his wife Beth. Let's check it out. Hey, I found Mark and Beth, the owners of the restaurant. So, Mark, I know you didn't move to Lisbon just to open up a restaurant. Can you tell me a little bit of the background and the genesis of how this all happened?
Sure. So Beth and I moved to Portugal with the intentions of living in Europe for a while. But when I arrived, I found the pork secretos, which is something that we just don't get in the United States. Fell in love with that cut of pork, and then looked at it and thought, boy, I could probably make a cheesesteak out of this cut. I went ahead and bought myself a slicer. I sliced up that secretos into a cheesesteak at home and just absolutely loved what I was doing with the sandwich. From there, we started to show friends. We invited friends over, showed them what we were making, and they really, really loved what we were doing. So Beth and I decided maybe we could do a pop-up. Maybe we should talk to some of our friends who have bars around Lisbon, ask them for some permission to do a pop-up, and got the ball rolling there. While the pork secretos is delicious, we also realized that the thing that we love the most about Philly, the real Philly, the cheesesteak made with beef and cheese and onions, that was also something that wasn't here. And we thought maybe we could do a pop-up where we show people both of these sandwiches, the original and what we discovered in Portugal.
So can you tell me a little bit about the research that you did behind making of the cheesesteak?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm not a chef. That's not what I did for a living. I am now, but it's not what I did for a living. My parents were in the restaurant business back in Philadelphia. So when we decided that we were actually going to make a go of this, we went back to Philadelphia. We met with some of the leading chefs in Philadelphia. One person in particular, Jack McDavid, was able to get us into Philadelphia, show us around, take us to some of the biggest names in Philly cheesesteaks, get a behind-the-scenes look. They showed us how do we slice the beef, how do we grill the beef. We met with a few bakers in Philadelphia, learned how to make the roll. Really went in deep and figured out, okay, what's the right way to make a Philly cheesesteak? I've been eating them all my life, but I haven't been making them all my life. So it was important to go ahead in and do that research and figure out from the pros, how do we get it done.
So from the research that you did, was that all done before the pop-ups, or was it a continuous and evolving process?
No, it was kind of in between. So we did our first pop-up just sort of learning to do it ourselves. I bought myself an at-home grill, like a plancha. I bought myself an at-home deli slicer and went to town just like learning and teaching myself how to do this somewhat through like YouTube videos. That was pop-up number one. Once that was a success, we realized that in order to go any further, we need to go get good advice. Because while it was a success, it was also, what you'd expect trying to make Philly cheesesteaks at home for the first time.
Yeah.
And trying to make 100 of them.
Yeah.
We needed some pro advice.
And then after the success of the pop-ups and the popularity there, how did you segue into, hey, let's make a restaurant?
Yeah.
So we did a few pop-ups and they were very successful. People were loving the sandwich. Everyone was coming up like, oh my gosh, this is something I've heard about my whole life in movies and TV shows and never tried. And so as we scheduled more and more pop-ups, people started to come back and ask like, when are you going to open? When are you going to open? And Mark and I kind of like sat down and looked at a bunch of factors and we're like, should we do this? And we were just like, you know what? Let's try. Let's see what it takes.
So, I guess the three main parts were for the cheesesteak, obviously the meat, the bread, and the cheese.
Yeah.
Can you talk about each of those three and how they evolved through this process?
So if you don't know, and a lot of people don't know this, Europe cuts their beef entirely different than the United States. So when you go to the United States, and especially in Philadelphia, you've got a market full of ribeye. You can find ribeye wherever you go. It's the exact cut that you would use for a Philadelphia cheesesteak. try to come over to Europe and ask for a ribeye, you really don't wind up in the same place. So we had to investigate what are the cuts that they actually make here. So we started with the picanha. And while the picanha it's a premium cut, and it actually did a pretty good job of making a cheesesteak, in the end we discovered that it was unpredictable. We were making cheesesteaks with it. Some would be tender, some would be tough. It wasn't exactly the perfect cut. So we talked to our butcher. We showed him, kind of on the map, if you will, where the ribeye comes from. And he was like, if you use this cut of beef, which was the asin, you're probably going to get a lot closer to the meat that you're looking for. So he said, let's do it. Let's give it a shot. So he sent us a whole asin roast. We took it apart. We butchered it. We figured out what it was made of, and that has become the perfect meat for us to make cheesesteaks here. It feels like a Philly cheesesteak. It tastes like a Philly cheesesteak. It's the right cut.
So obviously you can't get American cheese here. So what'd you do about that?
Yeah, so that's been the tougher one. We searched and we searched and we searched for something similar to American cheese. Now, what is it about American cheese that's so unique? American cheese, once you finally melt it into your sandwich, becomes a sauce. And when it mixes with the juices of the meat, it actually stays a sauce. So the whole time you're eating a Philly cheesesteak, it's juicy and saucy and feels like something other than melted cheese. When we tried to use the cheese here, which is all very high quality cheese, it didn't have the same effect. You put your cheese on, you would see it melt on the grill, you then return it to the sandwich and then bring it to the table, and the cheese would go from being saucy to just being back to a slice of cheese again. That wasn't exactly what you need to make a cheesesteak a cheesesteak. You needed a sauce. There was no way for us to import American cheese. It's not really something that's feasible for a restaurant like ours. So we went and we discovered what is the recipe for American cheese. What's making American cheese different than the cheese that we're getting here. And in the end, it takes an emulsifier. So it's sort of molecular gastronomy. It's not that complicated. But what we had to do was take the cheese that we get here and combine it with an emulsifier and turn it into sauce. And so that's where we're at right now. And if you taste the cheese that we're making here, it tastes fantastic because it's made with high quality cheese. But if you feel the texture of it, it stays melty and delicious in a sandwich, just like the American cheese would have.
Yeah, I've had several of your cheesesteaks, and that's why we're making this movie. So the last part was the bread. Tell me a little bit about how that process.
Yeah, sure. So the bread that's used to make a cheesesteak it looks like a baguette. It's long, but it doesn't taste like a baguette. A baguette has more structure to it, right? It's a little chewy. It's a little soft in the middle, but it's definitely chewy and crispy on the outside. If you've ever tried to take a true French baguette and make a sandwich out of it, you find yourself, having a little bit of a jaw workout trying to get through that whole sandwich. Taking bites of a baguette is a little bit, it's a little bit to that. So when we went back to Philly to figure out how are they making the sandwiches, we also went into the bakeries and said, what are you doing that's different than a baguette? And as it turns out, the recipe it's just different. It's just not the same. A baguette is made with what you call a lean dough, and when you make a Philly hoagie or a hoagie roll, you have to use an enriched dough. So the enrichment isn't very enriched. It's not like brioche, but you do have to add olive oil to the dough. And then once you've done that, you made an enriched dough. Now your process of baking is different. Your process of proofing is different. Your process of kneading is different. So we had to follow a pretty standard recipe of making Philly hoagie rolls rather than making baguettes. And that's how we arrived at the exact roll that we're using here.
That's fantastic. So obviously, your cheesesteak is a success. How did you decide to expand the menu? What other products and in what order did you add them?
Yeah, sure. So starting with the Secretor sandwich, that was the pop-up the start of the pop-up. Every pop-up we did had the Secretors together with the original classic Philly. Those were going to be the start of the menu, except when you take a look at a standard Philly cheesesteak menu, they have two mainstays. They have the Philly, the classic, and then they always have the chicken cheesesteak.
Yeah, and that was my favorite. Always, that's my order when I'm in Philly. So from the beginning, I was like, Mark, we have to bring a buffalo chicken cheesesteak. So Lisbon, I think they'll love it.
And if you can imagine starting a restaurant, trying to create a menu with everything on it from day one is probably a fool's errand.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to do the pork and the chicken and the beef and really expand the menu from day one, we decided to slim it down and go with beef and chicken as our first offering.
Yeah.
We knew that in doing so, we'd actually hit the real divergent audience there, the beef eaters and the non-beef eaters. With the pork, you're kind of finding yourself right there in the middle. You got beef people that like pork, and you got chicken people that maybe will eat pork and maybe wouldn't. So that's why we started beef and chicken, and we added the secretos once we got up and running and doing it the right way.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal menu. I love. I mean, I've had every single sandwich on it, and the beautiful thing about this restaurant is that it's an American sandwich, and the Philly cheesesteak that you make here is unlike any cheesesteak. You guys are the cheesesteak place in Portugal, so that's phenomenal. Delphi cheesesteaks. Look at that! Look at that! Look at that! Ah. I've had a lot of cheesesteaks in my life, but I gotta say, this one is incredible. The hot, tender, juicy, perfectly seasoned shaved beef, sauteed onions, that delicious secret melted cheese, all on a bakery fresh roll. Basically, all team up for a savory explosion of flavor from the first bite to the last. Wow, that was phenomenal. And the entire Delphi menu is actually awesome. Beth and Mark are genuinely good people, and they're doing something that they genuinely love. So if you're in Lisbon, please, by all means, give Delphi a shot. And if you're not in Lisbon, maybe you should be. Thanks for watching. Ciao, ciao.